We're going to go ahead and get started. I'm going to introduce you to our moderator, Anthony McGee with McGee Legal.
Thank you, Jeffrey. Welcome, everybody. I hope some of you were able to see our first installment of this series of small business seminars. It's basically called When Disaster Strikes, and last week we had a session dealing specifically with COVID-19, and we had planned a series before COVID even happened about how to deal with a disaster because of the tornado that everybody lived through. It seems like a different lifetime ago, last October. So now we're back on track with that. So this is part 2. It was originally going to be part 1. Now it's part 2 of our When Disaster Strikes series. We'll have another one in May the 7th. And so I wanted to start off by inviting Jeffrey to play a little slideshow that he put together for us, just to remind us of what happened back on October the 20th, 2019. Thank you, Jeffrey.
Okay, I'm gonna share the screen, and I hope there's no hiccups.
So can you just stop there for a second, Jeffrey? So this is our beautiful, pristine North Dallas Chamber of Commerce building, the new building that we all enjoyed being in. It seems like forever ago that we've stepped inside it. That's how it looked on the 20th of October, 2019. And then this happened. Oh, this is the ribbon cutting right there against the donor wall. On the right-hand side, you can see a meeting of the Small Business Committee. Look how huge that committee is. On the bottom left, you can see Corolla taking a selfie with everybody at Lots of Leads in the Steve Taylor boardroom. And then you can see a picture of an event from the kitchen. So you can see how many people have attended meetings at the chamber before October 20th. And then what happened, Jeffrey?
Then October 20th happened.
Yeah, so this happened, and you can see the aftermath. You can see on the right-hand side the roof of the North Dallas Chamber building almost ripped off. In the middle there, you can see looking up through the roof from the inside, and you can just see the scenes of devastation. That tree that you can see on the top left-hand corner, that was outside, or is outside, the old chamber building. All this other debris around the tree, the metal, the mangled parts, they're nothing to do with the chamber. They came from somewhere else. They belong to somebody else. It just shows you the devastation that occurred. And then on the next slide, you can see the neighborhood. The first one on the top left-hand corner, that's looking from the Chambers building back to the Gap and the Veritex Bank building. On the right-hand side, you can see some of the local duplexes. At the bottom, there's a picture of the Gap. After the devastation, there's a house there, probably just around the St. Mark's area. And then in the top middle, you can see a picture. Oh, can we just go back? The top middle there, that's actually the building that one of our panel members had her office in, Susanna Gibb, and she'll talk about that more in a few minutes. And then the next one is, Jeffrey, if you could go to the next one. There, just some sense of what happens when these weather events occur. In the bottom middle, there's a picture of Megan's brand new computer, or what's left of it. And on the right-hand side at the bottom, you've got, this is Jeffrey's desk. Now, he tells me that this is the after picture. I'm not convinced. It may be the before picture. But in any event, you can see his laptop on the left and the picture of him, and I assume his wife. And the laptop on the right, it doesn't even belong to the chamber. It came from somebody else's office. So that's pretty amazing. And then the next slide, this is you can see here where the tornado ripped through our neighborhood. And so you're kind of looking towards the west here, and down in the bottom middle, you can see the Preston Royal shopping area, Cecil Marks at School of Texas, and right there you can see the chamber. So the chamber was right in the middle of the path of the hurricane. Okay, and then and of course the coronavirus has just added insult to injury. But at the bottom left-hand corner, you can see the devastation inside one of the buildings, one of the retail buildings in Preston Royal, and it's probably the Gap. We're not exactly sure. Okay, and there's a radar indicated track of the tornado. You can just see it hit the ground and just kept on going, causing destruction. And I just wanted to read something from the Washington Post from the day after. It says, several tornadoes and violent, severe thunderstorms hit the Dallas metro area Sunday night, including at least one destructive tornado on the north side of the city that produced significant damage and knocked out power to tens of thousands of people. However, despite the extensive damage, there were no reported fatalities as of Monday morning, and no one still missing. So, and that's still, there were no fatalities, and there were no serious injuries, which is just absolutely amazing considering what happened. The Dallas Mayor Eric Johnson said, considering the path that the storm took, it went across a pretty densely populated part of a city. We should consider ourselves pretty fortunate. We didn't lose any lives, no fatalities, and no serious injuries. So that's a great thing. He said, property damage, we're not concerned about that. We've dealt with that before. Our number one priority is that people are safe. Well, he's right, but property damage is significant, has been significant. What we're going to talk about today is how do you dig out when you suffer that kind of property damage from a storm event like the tornado in October? How do you dig out of that? And that's what our panel is going to be talking about today. So I just wanted to introduce our panel members. First of all, I'm the moderator. I'm going to turn this over to them pretty soon, so you won't have to listen to me talking too much longer. But I'm a lawyer. I've been a lawyer for over 30 years. I started my legal career in England as a barrister, but I've been practicing law as an attorney in Texas for 20 odd years. And I am, this is my second year with the Chamber, and I'm on the Small Business Committee, and I've just recently become an ambassador, so I'm very much engaged in what the Chamber's trying to do. So let me introduce our panel members. We have 3 panel members. I'm going to start with Susanna. We have Susanna Gibb. Susanna, hi Susanna. Susanna's here in kind of 2 capacities, because Susanna's office was devastated during the tornado, so she's going to talk about her personal experience. But also, she's an insurance broker, if that's the right word, and so she's helped her clients deal with the aftermath of this event as well. And she started the Dallas office of the Gibb Agency in 1997. She's had 23 years of experience selling and servicing insurance accounts, and works with individuals and businesses on risk avoidance. She manages account renewals and looks for ways to keep losses low and reduce premiums by shopping with multiple carriers. And the Gibb Agency is a boutique insurance agency. It offers multiple lines of insurance, including health, home, auto, commercial, liability, property, workers' compensation, bonds, and life insurance. So just everything from A to Z right there. Here's an interesting thing about Susanna. In fact, there's interesting things about all our panel members. The interesting thing about Susanna is that she has a side gig as an actress. She's been in over 250 commercials, films, videos, and voiceovers, and she still occasionally acts a few times a year. And there are some commercials on the television from time to time that you might see her in, a Fast Science commercial and a Gold Bond Stop Your Scratching commercial, whatever that might be. So we're very excited to have Susanna with us today. So thank you, Susanna. Our next panel member is, I'm gonna get my stuff up on my screen, is Michael Martin. Michael Martin is employed by Dalworth Restoration. He's a risk management agent for them, He manages projects and develops projects, and his expertise is water damage restoration, mold remediation, things of that sort. He graduated from UT Arlington with a BA in political science, and also had a degree in international relations from Menendez Pelayo International University, which is very exciting. An interesting thing about Michael is that he's a formerly nationally ranked tennis player, which I think is really exciting. And so I'm going to lob some questions up to him later on. I hope he can smash them back over the net, but we'll see how that goes. Because of his interest in international relations, Michael has traveled a lot, and he's told me his favorite place to visit was the Amalfi Coast. And I can't say I disagree with him on that. So welcome, Michael. Thank you for being here. Our next panel member is Benny Wright. You all know Benny. Benny is a member of the board of the North Dallas Chamber. He's the chairman of the Ambassador Committee. He's held numerous leadership positions within the Chamber for the last 4 years. And last year, he was awarded the Paul Hansen Award for volunteerism within the community. For the past several years, Benny has worked for Janssen Adjusters International as a regional sales manager currently, and previously as a professional loss consultant. He consults with potential clients who have sustained a peril and advise them of their claim directive options. He identifies each peril as a viable route for company involvement for the proper financial recovery. And he'll tell you more about that later. He has some interesting certifications. He's a public adjuster in several states: Florida, Oklahoma, South Carolina, Tennessee, and Texas. But the one that I find most interesting, he's a BMX developmental coach through the American Bicycle Association. In fact, cycling seems to be one of his things because he's a multiple state, regional, national champion, a 5-time Team USA qualifier. So I'm just honored to have all these people helping us today with these exciting side interests. So that's Benny. Thank you, Benny, for being here. I think we lost Benny. Okay.
Thank you so much. Sorry, I was muted. Sorry about that.
All right. You should be wearing a bicycle helmet.
Yeah, I can go get one.
Okay. All right. So that's the welcomes. Let me just summarize our agenda for you so you know what to expect. We're going to be talking for about an hour and 10 or 15 minutes. There'll be time for Q&A at the end. But also, if you have questions in the meantime, please send them to us via the chat function. And if appropriate, we'll ask the panel members as they're talking to answer some of those questions. So if you have a question for a particular panel member, please let us know that in your question. So just to go over the agenda for today, we're going to have each panel member tell us about their personal experience with the tornado as it happened on the 20th of October. We're going to have them address the challenges that small businesses have to overcome in the wake of the tornado, and they're all going to talk about that from their particular perspectives. We're going to analyze a little bit, what things people were prepared for when that happened, and then we're going to analyze what they were not prepared for when that happened. And then finally, we're going to ask each panel member to tell us how they believe, from their perspective as an insurance broker, as a public adjuster, as a damage restoration expert, what measures can small business people take to weather the next storm? God forbid it happens. So that's basically our agenda. I'm already a little bit behind, so I'll have to speed us up a little bit. I'm going to go first to Susanna, and I'm going to give her a couple of minutes to describe for us her experience immediately after the tornado happened. But before you do that, Susanna, tell us what it is that you do from a professional perspective, and then tell us about how your experience immediately after the data happened.
So, hello everyone. Thanks so much for being here. I'm an insurance agent. So I sell commercial insurance, home and auto insurance. I sell health insurance. We're a boutique firm that we can handle all of your insurance needs. I have been doing this for 23 years. We're a family-owned independent agency. My dad started the business in Tyler in the 80s, and I branched out here to the Dallas office in 1997. So 23 years later, here I am. October 20th, this was Sunday, like many of you, I stopped watching the Cowboys game and I sought shelter. And I then spent the next 2 hours in the pantry that night making up Disney trivia for the kids. And though my home in Lake Highlands was on the path, the tornado lifted up and I was spared that. It was an F3 tornado that hit the North Dallas Chamber, traveled along Royal Lane up to Forest, and then veered up into Richardson. And it hit the building where I leased office space. You may remember the pictures of the Home Depot that looked like a can opener went through it. My building was just along in front of that along 75. And the building itself, it didn't look that bad from the front, but all the HVAC units were damaged on the roof or they had been pulled off. So water had rained in. There were ceiling tiles that were laying on the ground. The sheetrock and the carpet were very wet. And my office property didn't have a ton of damage, but a bunch of ceiling tiles had fallen down on my printer and my printer was sitting in water. So on the Tuesday after we were allowed in to get the personal items that we needed, it took me about 3 hours to make the light from Royal to 75, which is a whole 3 blocks. And on Thursday, we were told that we would be allowed to move out whatever we needed on Saturday. So I kind of rushed to get movers ready. And then on Friday, we were told, no, we had to move completely out. So I found a storage unit. Then on Friday at 11 p.m., they moved the move date to Monday because of rain on Saturday. It then rained on Monday as we moved out. There was no electricity in the building, so it was dark and musty. Smelled a lot like cat urine. Everyone else was moving out of the building also, so it was really crowded. And moving out of the building made me so sick I couldn't speak for 2 days, and so I was just whispering at my kids. I think mold or something got kicked up, I think probably combined with the rain and the stress, which is a good pass off to Michael. He can probably explain more of that horrible stuff that I was breathing in.
Thank you, Suzanne. Let me ask you a follow-up question, because that was your personal experience, but of course you professionally had a reaction to the tornado too. So tell us what happened in terms of dealing with your clients immediately after the tornado.
Well, while I was actually moving out, I was dealing with a huge cyber claim because this brings out, the minute you have a disaster, it brings out a lot of criminals who are ready to con and defraud you. So there was a big cyber extortion claim. So I'm like trying to email policies and deal with that as I'm trying to move out. I'm on the phone with my clients and talking to them about their roofers. I'm giving referrals to contractors. I'm advising them on how to handle their claims. One of my carriers actually called me during the middle of this time and said, hey, your client is in the middle of a disaster zone and we haven't heard from them. Are they okay? And I had talked with them. So I was, I knew they were all right, but I thought it was amazing that one of the carriers took the time to do that. So it was definitely a busy time of the year for us, aside from the disaster, because at the end of the quarter is always a busy time.
Okay, thanks, Susanna. So Michael, I don't know whether you personally had destruction from the tornado, but I know from the point of view of your business, you were very much involved right from the get-go, in particular with the chamber itself. So can you describe for us how what your experience was immediately after the tornado happened at 9 p.m., whatever it was, on the 20th of October.
Yeah, absolutely. First and foremost, Tony, thanks for that wonderful introduction, and thanks for having me on the panel, and thank everybody for coming out. So yeah, my day started kind of like what Susanna was explaining. I'm in Fort Worth, so I didn't have wasn't in a pantry or a bathroom or anything like that. But my phone calls started coming in around 10 o'clock that night from clients and customers, getting people taken care of. And that process ended at around 3:30 in the morning. Whenever I got done. And that's a combination from our business side. Really, it's a combination of taking care of the clients and customers, making them feel at ease, making sure they're safe first and foremost, responding to the critical emergency restoration calls, such as a house with broken windows and safety concerns that have to come in play. And then, of course, managing those expectations, which is the biggest thing from my personal experience starting off. To kind of hone into that, got to bed around 4 o'clock in the morning, slept for about an hour, and started making the trek out there around 5:15 in the morning. I had to park approximately a mile away from the site for my first couple jobs that I called in because of the destruction. I mean, just post-apocalyptic, dystopian kind of, a view. Power lines down, stuff crackling, huge, 50-year-old trees that are just split in half. I mean, just a crazy, crazy sight. And the pains from our side as a contractor, from what we personally experienced, was just getting to the people, just making sure that I could just get to them, which was just really, really eye-opening. Being a restoration emergency responder, well, emergency restoration, not emergency responder, we get to be on site whenever the loss happens. And so with that comes some personal challenges. However, at the end of the day, we do this quite often. So we try to come as prepared as we can. So from my personal experience, it was just a really eye-opening experience seeing the amount of destruction and everybody kind of running with their heads cut off on what to do. So it was an eye-opening experience. This would be considered my first major act of God loss that I was able to do. I've been with Dalworth Restoration for over 2 years now, so I've been very lucky to have the necessary resources and education to be able to do my job. However, this was a whole different ballgame.
Thank you, Michael. And did Dalworth actually help the chamber?
So we did. We did emergency contents and pack out for you guys, and then we also worked with Benny, which I'm sure he can talk about, just for necessary steps and making sure that we're in communication. But as far as the work for the chamber, it's the pack out that we did.
Okay, and and who'd you get? Somebody must have given you a call. You got a call from somebody at the chamber.
Yeah, I have. So I believe Bennett, my partner, was dealing a lot with the chamber specifically. I, however, were dealing with commercial customers on the Pemberton, Preston Royal kind of area. I had residential jobs in Orchid and Pemberton, and then also in that Central Market area, I had a couple commercial jobs over there as well.
Okay.
I was lucky enough to meet with Bennett and Benny during the initial loss at the chamber, and kind of was a part of that process as well.
Thank you. I'm going to ask Jeffrey a question, because rumor has it that Dalworth was on your doorstep pretty early on the 21st of October. Is that right?
Yeah. That Monday morning was pretty crazy. Obviously, police getting through blockades, things like that. Michael mentioned that he had to park a mile away. I was lucky enough to be able to scoot through some of those and talk my way past a few of those roadblocks. So I was there pretty early in the morning, and obviously we have contacts with several different types of businesses, and obviously Benny was one of the calls. Bennett happened to be walking up the street, so he was in the neighborhood on the job, walking up the street, probably 6:30, 7 o'clock in the morning, something like that. That it's ironic that he's both a member, a good standing member, longtime member, as well as part of the action team addressing the needs of the neighborhood. So.
Okay, Thanks, Jeffrey. Okay, I'm going to turn to Benny. Benny, you're a public adjuster. Some people may not really know what that is, but why don't you describe for us your experience immediately after the tornado happened on the 20th of October?
Yeah. So along with everybody else, thanks so much for being here today. We appreciate you guys joining us. So real quick, a public adjuster is licensed by the state to be a claims representative, claims advocate for the insured of a business or a home. The carrier is going to have their adjusters. The state actually allows you to hire your own adjuster as somewhat of a counterbalance there, and we'll get into that a little later. But obviously, spending most of my time, networking in the North Dallas area, and forging many relationships with a lot of people on this call, as well as other members of the chamber. That Monday morning, my phone was ringing pretty early, pretty often, and I remember getting a phone call from Jeffrey about 7:30 in the morning, and he really kind of undersold it. He said, the chamber's got a little bit of damage. If you could get here whenever you can, I'll be here. And so I jumped to the truck and headed that way, and fielding calls on the way, and got off 75 at Royal. Typical route I've taken to the chamber 1,000 times. And from that point to the chamber, if you were to draw a straight line, is maybe 3 miles, maybe. And it took me 2 hours doubling back through the neighborhoods and going down one-way streets the wrong way and that kind of thing, just to finally get there. And then I had to, kind of like Michael was saying, I parked down at the Preston Hollow Presbyterian Church and walked from there. I've been through situations like this many times before in various parts of the country, but they're usually a hurricane. And Oklahoma is probably the closest thing we've ever seen, near Dallas, so to speak, with a major tornado impact. But for all intents and purposes, I mean, this was a Category 4 hurricane that hit North Dallas. And so obviously, everybody that I either knew well or knew me or knew someone that knew me was calling for some advice very quickly on what to do and what to do next and how to stay protected through the process. So it was a very, very busy Monday morning, but it stayed busy for days to come and weeks, and we're still continuing with some of that stuff. So I mean, it was a major punch in the face to North Dallas, and I know everybody's responding accordingly, but it sure is a daunting process nonetheless for everybody. So,
thanks, Benny. So what I wanted to do now is ask each of you, and I'm going to start with Susanna from her personal perspective, but also as an insurance broker. What are the challenges that small business owners had to overcome in the wake of the tornado, Susanna? And start with your personal experience, but also some of the people you were working with as clients.
So to tell you it was stressful was really, an understatement. At the same point, there's not enough time in the day to be stressed about it. If you haven't moved in a while, there's some very instinctual thing about our space and our sense of stability and where our stuff is. Displacement is tough. There's also 1,000 little decisions that happen all day long when you move. It's really tiring. I had moved personally at the end of September, so moving again in October was not fun. One of my clients joked to me that moving is God's punishment for all your sins. But between moving out of the office, setting up movers, changing the movers, working from home, finding a storage space, looking for a temporary space, and I was on the fence of doing that, since at the time the word from the building owners was that the construction job would be 3 months. So, I was looking for a new space, and I began touring co-working spaces. And although co-working spaces are about 3 times what I was paying, moving completely into a new space and setting up the internet and the phones and the desks for a short time seemed daunting, and that's moving again. So we tried working from home for a bit, but I was in the process of training someone, and we had kind of yet to discover the power of Zoom. Despite the fact that I do sell insurance, I was really kind of hesitant to call in a claim because I didn't feel like I had a ton of damage. It was inconvenient, but once we got the co-working rates and the storage space rates and the movers rates, we did. And our policy was through one of our carriers, and Maria was my lovely claims adjuster. Most of my claims went towards what is called business income, or you may call it business interruption insurance. And while every policy is different, this is just a huge disclaimer on how my claim went with my carrier. This was my experience, and yours could be very different. But we paid regular amount of our rent, and they paid the excess. They paid for the movers, storage facility, and once I submit my profit and loss statement, we can go back to lost wages, which I was not going to do this at first because there's like some guilt about it in some way. And it just felt like, well, it's just 1 or 2 days when I moved, but it's really all those days before I set up my new space are claimable. You know, you need to make sure that you keep all of your documents so you can reimburse that and upload it to the site. And again, you know, as an insurance agent, my job didn't stop. It was really, it was kind of going on all the time. And then, you know, on December 15th, the landlord said, this is, you know, during our busiest time of the year, they were terminating our lease. Our building was a total loss. Apparently one side of the building had shifted. So that was—
Where exactly was your office located, Susanna?
It was at Forest and 75.
Okay.
Just right in front of that Home Depot. And it's funny when you look at it, it really doesn't look that bad, but I guess the amount to rebuild it and fix it is just more than it's worth. So we at the time debated, we were like, well, maybe we stay in this co-working space, but we felt like we needed a little bit more space. And so we started looking again, and, you know, it's a struggle for, I think, businesses, small businesses looking for space. It was a very different leasing environment. Rents were higher. They were less smaller spaces. So we did finally found a space. We moved again, which apparently had a lot of sins to atone for. And we moved in March 1, and we got to enjoy all of 15 days in our new space before Corona happened. But the insurance company paid for the movers again. So, you know, insurance is designed for these kind of situations. And so that was really a big help for us that we had a good policy.
Good. So, and that was your personal experience. So it must have been kind of a bit surreal going through that yourself, but at the same time, working on behalf of your clients, especially when you have these feelings of guilt about making a claim. How did you square the circle in dealing with your clients when you were having those personal feelings?
You know, a lot of people, you know, they call and they ask, and they're like, should I file this claim? And what's it going to do to my premiums? And, you know, sometimes we're like, you know what, maybe you call a roofer and see before you decide to file the claim. Maybe it's just, you know, you need a little patch and you're fine. But lots of times I find people like they're hesitant to file a claim. I'm like, that's what insurance is for. It's there. You've paid your premiums. It's there to help you recover and file the claim. It's not. There are cases where the claim is so large that maybe we have to move carriers, but you know, insurance is there for that reason and really to help you get back on your feet and to use it.
Okay, so here's a question. I'm going to put you right now, and we can deal with it in more detail later too. But the question is, this is from Gary: how can you make sure you're not underinsured, but also at the same time not overinsured in a situation like this?
Well, you need to prep and sit down with your agent and go over the amount of money that you feel like you need. So, you know, business income insurance, you know, some of the best coverages that you can have, because this was, and this is, you know, part of my prep for later, but I'll deal with a little bit of this now, which is, you know, if you can have business income, actual loss sustained with payroll, that's kind of the best coverages that you can have. But it's sitting down and coming up with a plan of, this is the property that I have, and, you know, taking the time before you have a disaster to see what you need. Obviously after's a little bit late.
Yeah, okay, thanks. So I'm going to switch to Michael. Thank you, Susanna. So, Michael, from your perspective, what were the challenges that you saw that small businesses had to overcome in the wake of the tornado?
Yeah, that's a great question. So really what a lot of these problems are typical for a damage on your property. However, what really sets itself apart in this unique situation is the amount of damage that we're talking about and how many people. So typically the problems that I saw, first and foremost, which is super important during an area-wide disaster, is response time. When is someone getting out here? making phone calls. I'm getting a hold of contractors, roofers, restoration companies, all these people. There's door-to-door guys like myself at 5 o'clock in the morning. But the real question is, when is somebody getting out here? Because typically when a large event, area-wide event, disaster happens, I don't care how many restoration companies or roofers are around, there's not enough work. I mean, there's not enough labor that's available. There's not enough equipment. There's not enough labor. So when does somebody get out here? So that was the biggest problem that we face, or excuse me, not we face, that potential homeowners and business owners had, because it's like, okay, you're here, you're handing me a car. When are you getting here? Is it tomorrow? Is it the next day? Is it the day after that? So that's a huge problem that we experience with some of the commercial clients. The second one, which kind of falls into that, is communication and transparency. So you got all these guys that are here, whether it's a restoration or general contractor, roofer, landscaper, just all this kind of stuff. You got all these guys here, but what's going on? What is the process that we need to take to get back up and running to start mitigating this damage? And with your insurance agency, with their hand in the cookie jar, with maybe a public adjuster as well, and then your contractor and your decision maker, we got a lot of decisions to make. So it's imperative to stay in communication and to stay transparent throughout the whole process. So we're all on the same page, so we're moving together and not being adversarial throughout the whole process. That's a huge decision. I mean, Susano talks about all these little decisions that have to be made during this time while she's working at the same time. So I can't imagine the stress that comes with stuff like that, with getting, fighting a war on two fronts almost in a way. So that was a huge problem that we kind of came to, who's the decision maker? We need to move forward. We can't sit around and spin our wheels. And then last and ultimately, which is always a big problem, is timeline. We have an unprecedented disaster, as Biddy was talking about. He's dealt with hurricanes before, but we really don't get a tornado hitting on Preston and Royal with billions of dollars in damages. It doesn't just happen all the time. So what does this timeline look like? And a lot of the commercial clients that we had were saying, I want to see some light at the end of the tunnel, and how do I do that? So kind of going in full circle, those were the three of the major problems that I saw with business owners, with going, Benny said it best, what do I do next? Yeah. And in the next segment, I can talk about some proactive approaches to take, but those were the problems that we kind of saw that were, again, a problem with whether you have a water heater bust in September or January. All these problems are still the same, but it's multiplied, it's amplified whenever you have this area-wide event or disaster.
So let me ask you a follow-up question, because you mentioned, this is on an unprecedented scale, so you've got lots of need all at the same time. And you also mentioned the fact that, there are some safety issues too. So how do you triage those situations and figure out where to start?
So, word starts from us from a project management standpoint is like we talked about from a safety issue. We want to take care of people that are in some sort of a hazard. If they're in a hazard, we got to get them taken care of. And that protects us from downstream liability, but it also is the humane thing to do. I mean, you want to take care of somebody that's in trouble. So, if your roof, you've got a little water in your house, okay, we're going to get to you. But if somebody's got windows busted in, something's fell on them, they're having to relocate outside in a tarp, which I've seen before when I was down there. They're literally camping outside on their lawn because they can't be in their house right now. Those kind of factors are very problematic. And what we need to do is we have to take a methodical approach to it. And that happens through an emergency response plan. We got to take care of our customers first, our clients, our returning clients. We got to take care of them. They're the ones that we have a personal relationship. So we have come almost like an A and a B list. You got Joe from Google calling us, and then you got so-and-so LLC that does business with us. So of course we prioritize the clients that take care of us. But also it's much bigger than that. So we talk about safety issues. We talk about the thin labor and equipment that's necessary. And from us, from a fortunate standpoint, is we own all of our equipment. We don't subcontract any of our equipment out. I have 4 trailers, catastrophe trailers outside with dehumidifiers, with fans, with generators, with all this kind of stuff. So we come prepared for a catastrophe event. So we're able to distribute this equipment and labor out appropriately. But yes, you're always going to have some sort of headaches, and that's from a logistical standpoint of just not taking on too much work. We want to take care of the people that take care of us first and foremost, and emergencies as well.
Okay. Hey, thanks, Michael. So Benny, how about your perspective? What are the challenges that you saw small business owners having to overcome in the immediate wake of the tornado?
Yeah, so kind of stemming off of what Michael said, you know, obviously when damage occurs to your building, the first priority before you do anything is to secure that building from any further damage or any injury. You know, last thing you want is somebody, you know, coming by, rubbernecking, so to speak, taking pictures and getting injured on your property, and now you got a liability issue, and you don't want to have any of that. But you know, the big thing that a lot of small business owners have, especially in a competitive market like North Dallas, North Texas, is how do I stay in business? How do I keep my customers? And how do I operate from a temporary location, seeing how my primary location is all but destroyed? You know, a lot of people have a competitor nearby. We see it a lot with nail salons. Nail salons are notorious for catching fire. What ends up happening is there's always one around the corner that hears about it and, you know, runs a special or, you know, some sort of sale deal to pull those customers over. You know, same thing with, there's a dentist that we're taking care of in that Preston Hollow area. Well, luckily they have another location, but that other location is fully functioning and running. And so they're doing a balancing act of trying to absorb customers from location one into location two when location two really doesn't have the room for them. And then you've got other people that maybe location two isn't conveniently located for them. So now they're starting to look elsewhere for, you know, another person to you know, be their go-to for that particular need. So what we saw immediately was a lot of fear from a lot of business owners of, hey, what do I do now? How do I stay in business? How do I alert my customers that the continuity of our business is going to stay? I would say you know, being that this is hosted through the chamber did a fantastic job of that because for two reasons. One, they have a great constant contact list where they were able to alert all of their members immediately of the damages. And I think Lizeth, Jeffrey, and Megan and Ken were instrumental in that first week of giving all the members basically daily updates of what was going on and what to expect, and just kind of I think a calming reminder that, hey, we're here, we're not going anywhere just because the building's damaged, you know, we're not shutting down kind of thing. And a lot of businesses were able to you know, activate that constant contact. But if you didn't, a lot of them were really scared of what to do next. And that was kind of the first questions we were getting Monday morning of, yeah, that's fine. We know we got to file a claim, but you know, how do I stay in business? How do I keep my employees? You know, I've had faithful employees for several years. What happens if, you know, I can't give them work? What happens if I can't pay them? So those are all questions that start fielding very early in the process. And like Michael said, as long as you've got kind of your disaster plan in place, and like the right experts, so to speak, in each lane, you know, everybody's kind of moving the ball down the field just in kind of a different fashion for a different expertise. You know, speaking of a disaster plan, you know, a lot of times, you know, not to dumb it down too much, but, you know, if you have a crime, you call 911 and they put you on the phone with a dispatcher. Well, depending on the type of the crime is the type of response that dispatcher is going to take care of and line up to respond to that call. When an insurance claim happens, it's kind of the no different mindset, but you've got to have the proper response for the type of issue that you've got at hand. And so with a tornado, you're going to have, you know, roofs pulled off and windows blown out and power lines down and some serious damage. I mean, like Susanna was talking about, her building didn't look that bad, but one wall was shifted. So now you've got kind of an engineering problem. So I mean, there's a lot of things that start to snowball really quick, and having those trusted advisors, so to speak, in each one of those roles is instrumental and can certainly drop your blood pressure quite a bit with a scary situation like a tornado.
Thanks. And, you know, obviously insurance is a big issue. I assume that you're not going to get a check overnight. You may have to go to temporary location, as Susanna mentioned. And I think one of the challenges that you indicated that some people have is, how do I operate from a temporary location? So do you have any experiences of how people have been able to do that, Benny?
Yeah, so Susanna alluded to it too with a coverage called Business Interruption. There's some various ways that is written in a different policy. So the best that I've seen and the best that we've worked with is what they call actual loss sustained. And what that means is in general terms, basically reasonable costs that are incurred by the small business owner will be covered under the policy. Now, usually there's a time element to it, 12 months or 180 days along those lines. Other policies that are written in a way where there's a cap on that. There's usually an additional part called extra expense. With those two categories of coverage built into a policy, there's a lot of you can make sure that your business stays operational even in a temporary space. It's just a matter of getting the right guidance and activating that coverage. So,
okay, well, thank you. I'm going to switch to a new topic, if I may. I'm going to ask each of you to talk a little bit about preparedness. There are some things people are prepared for. There are some things people aren't prepared for. I think Jeffrey mentioned it right at the outset. We're preparing for the worst. I mean, we're hoping for the best, of course, but we're preparing for the worst. And so I wanted to start with Susanna and have her tell us, what she and people similarly situated were prepared for when the disaster struck in October 2019.
Our data, this was a huge help to us. Our data was in the cloud. So we were able to pick up our laptops and cell phones and carry it on. And we're probably even more paperless now because of this time. I had a really good insurance policy with the right coverages, and this helped mitigate our losses. We didn't have to come up with a ton of money out of pocket to pay for our co-working space or moving or anything like that. I had my insurance agent on speed dial. We had a lot of conversations. We forwarded our phones so we didn't lose any calls, and we had told our clients, we always tell our clients we're always available to help with claims and to call us with any questions. So we fielded a lot of calls, and we were able to direct people to very reputable tradespeople for estimates and repairs.
Can you tell us a little bit more about the business income policy that you had? What did it cover, for example, that was helpful to you?
Well, a lot of like what Benny said, ours was a business income policy with actual loss sustained and with extra expense. So, I'm going to go back and submit those claims for the lost income. But the extra expense portion was huge for us because that was the extra money for the rent. The rent at the co-working space was 3 times higher. So all of those expenses were paid for. And that was a huge, huge help to us. For some companies, depending on, business income, actual loss sustained, is some of the best. But some people, you do have to come up with a limit, which is based on your sales and the amount of time it takes you to recover. So it's, sitting down and having that kind of talk ahead of time so you have enough money to be able to keep your business going when the doors are shut. Because the bills don't stop.
Yeah, and that also, does that also cover lost profits? Is that what you said?
Mm-hmm. It can, yes.
And how is it a challenge to develop and claim for lost profits and to convince the insurance company how much they should pay you?
In my experience, it wasn't. I have to submit my profit and loss statement, which and every claim goes a little bit different because every business is a little bit different. So some people will show, well, these were my sales last year at this time, or they can use, well, these were my sales last month before this happened. But sitting down and working with an adjuster, if you don't have a great adjuster, Betty can help you with this as far as getting those numbers and being like, this is what I would have made. And the insurance company wants to keep you in business because they want to keep your business. So.
And are they paying you in real time, or is this a retroactive claim that you make after a period of time?
With my experience, they gave me a dedicated claim site where I would upload. I uploaded my moving, and she cut a check for the moving. I uploaded my rent, and she wrote a check for me. So it was kind of like the money was ongoing, and I didn't have to really wait for it.
What about the lost profits? Is it the same for that?
Well, it probably would be if I have submitted it, but I haven't submitted it. I've been kind of lax about getting it done.
Okay, is this part of the guilt complex?
Probably. You know, when I was doing all the work for the PPP loan, it's like kind of like it forces your hand to get all of that done. And now it's just a matter of submitting it up there.
Okay, and you also had property insurance. So how did that help you?
The property insurance, I didn't have a ton of claims. You know, my printer was sitting in water, but I think because the electricity had been cut off before, after my printer, I have like one of these big giant printer scanners things. We let it dry out and then we plugged it back in and miraculously it worked. So some of my other property claims, I have these like, you know, Give Agency giveaway cups that collected a bunch of roof water. So I threw those away. I was like, I'm not going to clean those. And so I just submitted the receipts of stuff that I had bought and she wrote the check.
Okay. Did you have clients who weren't as fortunate as you? They didn't have their data in the cloud and maybe all their computer systems and everything else was destroyed?
You know, not in this particular one, but that's probably what turned me on to Carbonite, for example, which automatically backs up your data because they had a huge electrical loss and they thought that they had done a good job backing up their data on the external hard drives, but realized that it wasn't, and it took a really long time for them to build it up. So, you know, a lot of my particular clients that had a loss, they were personal. So it wasn't a ton of businesses, luckily. So it was mainly just, you know, they were roof claims, they were reconstruction claims and health stuff.
Okay, thank you, Suzanne. I'm going to ask Michael the same question. What did you find that your clients were prepared for?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, I mean, I got a lot of stuff to talk about what they weren't prepared for. But as far as Susanna made a really good claim with the cloud information. So a lot of people I found were prepared for their, I don't want to say business interruption because that's not the right word for it because they weren't prepared for the business interruption, but they kind of had an idea of what to do. So typically whenever we talk about this kind of stuff, a lot of people are reactive to this kind of thing. But I found a lot of businesses did take somewhat of a proactive approach, whether that's their employees, documentation, or just having a small plan in place. As far as specifics for what people were prepared for, I really didn't get much of that, to be quite honest. A lot of it was just like, hey, we have our data moved. I've already reached out to my insurance agent. I'm getting my policies sent over to me. So getting the ball moving, there was a lot of that going on. However, kind of counterproductive, in a counterproductive sense, when you got 400 phone calls coming in every minute, it's hard to get that information in real time when you have to make real-time decisions. So really for me, what were people prepared for? Well, positivity is kind of the word for it. I had a lot of people that were very positive about the outcome. One, first and foremost, no serious injury, no fatalities. So that kind of lifted people's spirits and kind of taking that positive approach and kind of going, look, my business is shut, not necessarily on the residential, but on the business side, it was, look, we're all okay. My employees are okay. We got our information. We've made that contact. So that initial positivity is actually really important because it helps expedite the situation. You're not mulling it over. You're not dragging your feet. You're actually okay with the situation. So really that's kind of my only focus of what they were prepared for in that sense. As far as from a company standpoint from us, you know, this is our bread and butter. This is what we do. So again, reverting back to what I said before, having 4 cat trailers with full dehumidifiers, generators, fans, all that kind of stuff, being able to take care of our clients and not biting off more than we can chew is really important for us. To be able to get everybody back up and running as quick as they can. But really, I don't have too much to say about what they were prepared for because I deal with what they're not prepared for.
Yeah,
we already have something prepared for. They got it done. Michael, I already got a roofer. Don't worry about it. You know that. We're
going to get to that in a minute. I just want to ask Benny, what impressed you about what people were prepared for when you were dealing with them in the aftermath of the tornado?
I was impressed with those that had a speed dial disaster plan and knew who to call. You know, there's a number of stories that are similar to Jeffrey Williams on this call of making the call in the first thing in the morning of Hey, I know we're going to have an insurance claim. Let's get my insurance expert out here. Benny, get here as soon as you can. At South Lake, we've got to secure the bill.
Okay, lost Benny for a second.
Pecking sorry, you lost me? You got me?
Yeah, you're back.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, there was kind of a pecking order of who to call and who could get there right away. But along the same lines, a lot of people fail to realize that when you file an insurance claim, that the responsibility of proving the value of that claim truly lies on you. The insurance company will gladly send someone out that'll do it from their standpoint, and obviously that a lot of times that's good enough. But having somebody there that can kind of lead that charge and be on that team that you've assembled is a lot more comforting than otherwise. And what you end up finding a lot in that kind of situation is, and I don't mean to sound this in an arrogant way, but a lot of the adjusters that are coming to handle that area are being handed a number of claims to handle all at one time. And so if they're getting 50, 100, 150, 200 at a time, there's only so many hours in a day, and there's only so much time they can dedicate to each claim. And so what we find a lot is that when the carrier adjusters that have been around for a while, that have dealt with us in the past, show up, a lot of times they'll look and go, you know what, we know you guys aren't going to balloon this thing into something it's not. I've got 45 other appointments I got to get to. You do your thing, and we'll sync up later at the week. And so it helps with that mentality of everybody in the beginning thinking, I don't really need urgency because we're all in this together. There's thousands of people affected. And the problem with that mentality is your patience wear off about three to 4 months later, when you think, you know what, I was patient in the beginning, and now I'm paying the price for it because I'm way down on the list of priority to be seen. And so the people that took that initiative right that morning and said, get my people out here, get things moving, were the ones that saw some speed and some efficiency to, getting their recovery put together.
Okay, thanks, Benny. So let's transition to the negative side of it. And I'll stick with you, Benny, for now. What were the things that you realized people just were not prepared for?
A lot of it comes down to coverages in the policy and not really understanding what classifies as what. To use a claim that we've handled, there's valuable papers coverage. That's a pretty broad term, but that's an additional pocket of coverage. Debris removal, getting the damaged items of the building removed from the property. There's coverages for that. So activating a lot of those policies, but a lot of times you see people that, let's be honest, insurance isn't relevant until it's relevant. Everybody thinks they're immune from ever having to utilize the policy. And a lot of business owners are very proactive in realizing the worst of the worst can happen, and they're prepared for it. Other ones are more along the lines of, I'll take my chances because statistically, I'm not likely to be completely decimated. And they would be right in that statement. But the problem is you find yourself flat-footed a lot of times in that regard. And so a lot of that's kind of what we run into more along the lines than anything is what type of coverages do they have, and do they know how to truly activate them and see the recovery from them.
You mentioned the stress involved. You mentioned the inundation of information that didn't seem relevant. Being caught on the hop, maybe being in denial. How significant were those feelings in terms of an impediment to making quick progress from your experience?
With us, our main goal is consumer advocacy, and so we're trying to calm the situation as quickly as we can, but be very kind of strategic in the movement of the benefit for that insured or business owner. The inundation of bad information a lot of times comes from, basically storm chasers. Unfortunately, Texas doesn't require licensing for contractors. And so, whoever goes down to Alpha Graphics and prints off a magnet and slaps it on their door can be a contractor for the day. And, if you've never gone through this process before, never had a discussion with someone about what to do when that does occur, or if it does occur, there's a lot of information that can be shared to you that may sound relevant and good and warm-hearted that day from a really bad source. And so, Michael alluded to it where he said, you've got the, LLC and, company he's dealt with before. That's because they trust them, and you want to have that there. Same idea with Susanna. People are calling saying, hey, I trust you. What should I do? Rather than kind of being flat-footed and dealing with a bunch of door knockers that are, chasing storm damage,
Okay, I'm going to ask the same question of Michael. What are some of the ways in which you found your clients were not prepared and which hindered the remediation process?
Yeah, so this is a topic I feel a little bit more comfortable talking about, and really, it all stems from what Benny was talking about whenever he mentioned at the very beginning, what do I do next? So the reality of the situation is we can only do so much on the reactive side. So we have to look at it from a proactive approach. And a lot of my clients didn't have, simple things, didn't understand their coverage first and foremost. You guys touched on it, and I don't want to touch on it too much, but how important that is to understand what business interruption is and what's covered, what physical damage is covered, any of that kind of stuff is so important, because as a contractor, I can't interpret policy whatsoever. That's Benny's job. That's Susanna's job to talk to you guys about that. So when we got to make decisions in real time, we need to have all the information that we can. And you from the business owner, if you can't explain that to me and I can't reach out and find out what's going on, it's very hard to get some progression going, to get some movement going. So that's where it starts. It starts with understanding your coverage on a proactive side, not a reactive side, which I found not many people did. And if they did, kind of piggybacking off Benny again, it was misinformation. It's stuff that wasn't quite sure what's going on. And that goes into the actual logistics of everything. So once you get that covered, a lot of my clients didn't have inventory, simple inventory. You have all this damage that's in here. You're looking at it from a reactive post. Well, do you know how many computers you had and if they were damaged? Do you know how many printers you had? Do you know furniture, all that kind of stuff? Having that inventory beforehand is really important. And I found that little to none. The biggest thing, though, kind of going full circle, the biggest thing is, again, what Benny said, what do I do next? I found it very shocking that most of my clients who I've talked about taking a proactive approach before didn't really listen. And what does that mean? Well, that means from my standpoint, from a contractor standpoint, is being able to call somebody. Do you have a roofer? Do you have an electrician? Do you have a drywall guy? Do you have a mitigation guy? There's a lot of hands in this cookie jar, and being able just to trust GC number 101 that comes and knocks on your door, that's not good enough. It's not. Kind of what Benny was talking about with these storm chasers, it was a major problem down on the residential side for sure, because these guys just come in, they say, hey, I'm going to take care of everything. Here's my card. We're coming. We'll be here in a couple hours. And they disappear. They take a deposit, they take payment up front, and they just disappear. So being informed, being an informed business owner is extremely important. And taking a proactive approach is extremely important. What does that mean? It means knowing a roofer, having a plan in place, being able to go, I know to call this guy and this guy's going to take care of me. And a lot of it was just reactive. We're going, oh, crap, what do I do next? And excuse my French, but you're already behind the 8 ball whenever you're doing that kind of stuff. You're already 2 steps behind.
Yeah, so, I'm one of those odd people that actually reads documents before I sign them.
One of the few.
Having been a lawyer for, since I was 18 years of age, I tend to read things before I commit to them. But I know a lot of people don't. They have a lot of stress. They have a lot of time constraints, and they just assume everything's going to be fine. They don't read stuff. But even when you do read stuff, it's not always clear what it means.
Yeah.
So I would have thought the worst time to be finding out what this coverage means is when you're potentially fighting with an insurance carrier about what they're going to pay for.
Right.
So how that must present a challenge for you if you have a client that doesn't really understand the extent of their coverage, and yet you see work that needs to be done. How do you, connect the dots when you're working with a client?
So a lot of times that we have that clear communication and that transparency that we need, it's with the help of people like Benny, to be quite honest. We're always in constant contact with the insurance adjuster, with the broker or the actual insurance carrier themselves. And we want to make sure any work that we have is approved beforehand. because we don't want to do anything out of the scope of work that's not covered. However, at the end of the day, we're just a contractor. It's people like Benny, it's people like Susanna that are able to interpret that policy and say, look, you need to go ahead and move forward with this. Look, I need you to realize that this potentially is not covered or this is not covered. And so having good resources or good people in your corner to be able to give you that instruction, to give you that progression is vitally important. From my company perspective, at the end of the day, I'm like Benny. I'm here for the client, for the person that hired me. It's my job to get him up to pre-loss condition, to do it to the best of my ability, efficiently, and budget friendly as well for the insurance company, because I don't want you paying out of pocket when you don't have to. So that's a real concern of ours. However, at the end of the day, I can't interpret policy. So it's people like Benny that help us hand in hand to be able to get the client the coverage that the check that they need for something like that. And it's also our job to make sure that we don't do anything out of the scope of the work. So you don't have the insurance carrier upset with Susanna because she sent me a client that I'm, gouging them with. So it's a delicate dance being in the middle, being a contractor. But at the end of the day, I want to make the client happy, and I do whatever I need to do to make the client happy.
Okay, thanks, Michael. So Susanna, from the point of view of the insurance broker, and also somebody that went through this yourself, what are the things that you felt you and people maybe similarly situated to you were just not prepared for when this tornado came through?
Despite the fact that I talk to people about their plans all the time, I didn't have a formal disaster plan. Says my internet connection is unstable, so I apologize if I go in and out.
Okay.
I had a good idea of like, well, this is what I'll do, but having a written disaster plan is super important. My team didn't know what our disaster plan was. We didn't have a plan for even, what happens in inclement weather. I mean, it seems like a total no-brainer, but setting up those expectations for employees, and I saw the relief on their face when I was like, if it's storming, just stay home. I wasn't prepped for how important a backup space was going to be for us. That one of the other things that I was definitely not prepped for was one of our employees went on leave during this process. So our manpower was a little down, and I should have hired a temp. We lost access to some of her text messages during this period, so I was really worried that clients may be calling and that we wouldn't know it. So I think a lot of it goes into my job is prepping with people ahead of time and making sure that they take the time to prep, because everybody's like, well, I'm busy and we'll get to that. So making sure that people really take the time to prep so that when, I'm before and Michael's going to be during the disaster, and then Benny's going to help you after.
Okay. I hate to ask you this question, Susanna, and if you don't want to answer, we can pretend that your coverage broke off, but do you have a disaster plan now?
I have the beginnings of one. It's definitely shifted over the course of it. As I've seen, I've only been in my new space for 15 days before the coronavirus kind of kicked me out. So having an idea of, what works and what didn't. But it's we learned a lot in the process, and unfortunately you learn a lot once you go through it, and how you would do it differently, and how I can advise my clients has changed throughout the process as well.
So it's a work in progress.
Absolutely.
Okay. All right.
I mean, these are tough questions, and it's hard for businesses because it's not like I can tell you this is my disaster plan and then you can take it. Every single business is different, and how you communicate with your employees, what you need, how you're going to stay operational. Especially if you're in manufacturing, that's a totally different ballgame, because people in manufacturing, do you have an alternate supply? Can you talk to other manufacturers about, can you manufacture in their space? Are you going to keep your employees? Are you going to lose your employees? So sitting down with your staff to figure out that is, individualized to every business. And, you know, we in the insurance industry, we can help you and we can provide you, here are the questions that you need to ask yourself. And, you know, I have a sheet that I'm happy to share with people. We did a lot of this work after Katrina and Rita, because that shut down so many businesses at one time, and it definitely changed how we approached it in the industry.
Sounds like a business niche for somebody. You know, customized disaster plans.
Well, yeah, for a consultant to come in, I'm sure they could totally do that.
Okay, well
But
that's
it's
a
a
nice.
lot of what we do as well.
Yeah, it's a nice segue to our final topic, and I think I'll start with Benny, and really, you know, we've talked about a lot of the problems and how you overcome them. From the point of view of a public adjuster, Benny, you know, how would you advise small business owners, people that are listening to this seminar today, how to prepare to better weather the next storm?
The obvious answer right off the bat is a disaster plan, and I know we keep beating the dead horse on that, but I cannot stress how important that is to have your trusted people in place. But the number one thing I always tell people when I get asked this question is a two-prong approach. Request a policy analysis of what you have in place right now, and do everything you can to have a great relationship with your agent or broker like Susanna. The number one thing that people always are doing with their business is they're typically trying to grow. And so if you're scaling up that business, maybe you're expanding on your footprint in your building. Maybe your sales are spiking because you just struck a deal with a major distributor of some sort. You know, all of those things are factors in if a disaster happened right then and there. And so constantly revisiting that conversation, you know, you can avoid issues like a co-insurance penalty, or a profit loss statement that you don't have coverage for. And so having that trusted advisor as the one creating the policy, it makes your life a heck of a lot easier. It makes Michael's life a lot easier, and it makes my life a lot easier in being able to fully recover you. I mean, the idea behind an insurance policy is to make you whole again. And so if you go down for 6 months, well, what was it like October 19th as a snapshot of your business, and what's it going to take to get you back there? You know, sometimes people don't account for the fact that, hey, I'm back open in 6 months, but I don't have the same customer traffic. I don't have the same employee list that I had before. And so there's a scale up process of after the problem as well that needs to be addressed when building the policy. And so I can't stress it enough, talking with somebody like Susanna, and getting that knowledge of saying, you know, somebody that's familiar with your business and your property, and the needs of it, can go a long way.
Okay, and is that something that Janssen Adjusters is in any way involved in at the moment?
Yeah, we're kind of the operations side of an insurance policy from a financial standpoint and kind of a legality standpoint, if you will. You know, we're not allowed to swing hammers and that kind of thing, but we're designed to speak on the behalf of the policy and activate what's in it. And so we're constantly reviewing policy, especially now because obviously it's front of mind and everybody's concerned about, you know, potentially down the road. But yeah, we do free analysis all the time, and we'll pull different reports for different properties and make sure that, you know, if the value is increasing, the building material cost is going up. Those are all things that you want to have, you know, checkbox or a box check, you know, so to speak, when you sit down with your agent, and you can have a much more informed decision. So yeah, we do those all the time.
So I would assume that you would agree that the time to call your public adjuster for the first time is not immediately after the disaster struck.
Yeah,
So-
that's kind of the second time that you want to call them. The first time you want to call them, make sure that you've got the preparations in place. I mean, it's kind of like locking the front door. I mean, you don't do it because you think something bad's going to happen. You do it because you want to, you know, protect yourself in the event something does, you know, kind of thing. So yeah, you should have 2 phone calls for sure.
So you know, this notion of a public adjuster was kind of a bit arcane to me until a few months ago when I met you and understood what you did. But I mean, how do people how do people become aware of public adjusters and what they do and how they can help?
You know, the unfortunate part of that is most people don't realize that they exist or they have the option for one until well after a disaster struck and the carrier is not treated them as fairly as they had hoped. And now they start Googling, answers. And that's usually where they find them out. And a lot of times that kind of has the same analogy of calling out the detectives to investigate a crime that's 6 months old.
Yeah.
A lot of evidence is gone, a lot of that kind of stuff. So, excuse me. So, I mean, we don't run commercials or, radio ads, that kind of thing. So, for us, it's shaking hands and getting to know people through the chambers and network and that kind of thing. But yeah, I mean, real quickly, I grew up in South Florida through the 2000s where seemed like there was a hurricane every other month. And at the time, my dad's sister was our insurance agent. And so when something goes wrong, you assume that, family's got you covered, no big deal. Well, we quickly realized that the adjuster coming out from the carrier doesn't know who my dad's sister is and they're not on the same page. And so watching that family meeting a couple months later when things didn't go as assumed was a little rough. And so that's why I kind of realized that there's got to be an easier way to do this and a more effective way to benefit the person that's truly impacted by it.
Yeah, and so I assume you're a regulated industry. I mean, you're certified by the Department of Insurance in various states. Are there any kind of ethical or professional restrictions on your ability to partner up with insurance brokers, restoration companies, so that you're getting basically referrals from them or people saying, you need to talk to my friend Benny now that you've got this policy so that, if you need to call upon it, there's a resource? I mean, is there any limitation on doing that?
No, not at all. The only restrictions we have is that we can't give or receive referral fees. And so it's strictly a professional service, trusted advisory role kind of thing. And a lot of our business comes from brokers and restorators and contractors, that kind of thing, because, think of a 3-lane highway. We're only in one lane. It's the other lanes that are all headed the same direction. But, brokers and agents usually like us.
They want that return.
And so obviously if the, 2 reasons of someone usually leaves a carrier has been a bad claim or a cheaper policy. Well, we can handle the claim and you can obviously make sure that the policy is affordable. Same idea with kind of the restoration company, or contractor. They want to be able to put the building back without having to cut corners and put Band-Aids on it. And if there's not a financial ability for them to do that, they're kind of somewhat tarnishing their good name by putting together putting a product that's not of the quality that they're used to. And so for us, we're kind of a multi-pronged advocate in that process. Okay.
So thanks, Benny. And Michael, you've alluded to this a little bit already, this disaster plan, being proactive. What is it that your company and the kind of business that you have, what is it that they can do to help small business owners better weather the next storm?
Yeah, absolutely. So, kind of harping on what everyone's talking about, it is so imperative to have a plan in place, whether that's an emergency response plan from us, whether that's a disaster response plan with Susanna, a consultant on here as well talked about it. Just having a plan in place is so important because what I always like to say is time and severity is going to equal costs. So to be able to minimize any of those options is imperative for everybody, every party in play. So I usually give an example, and this goes for anybody and everybody. So whenever you're going to choose a doctor or you have a doctor or you have a choice between 2 doctors, isn't it not more sound to choose the doctor who understands your pre-existing conditions, your blood type, who you are as a person? You have a relationship with that doctor, and that's why you go to him. You don't just go to a new doctor every single time because the whole minutia that comes from the beginning side of getting to know the customer. So having an emergency response plan in place is imperative. And what the emergency response plan does for everybody, is specifically with Dalworth Restoration as well, is first and foremost, it helps you secure priority response in the event of an area-wide disaster or weather event. Whenever you become an emergency response client or get on the ERP program, if you will, it makes you in that A column that I've talked about before. So you're not Joe from Google giving me a call. We've actually built a relationship together. And what that ERP plan does is it puts in place important factors that helps alleviate stress, aggravation, costs, all that good stuff like that, such as gaining valuable information about your building. What's the square footage? How many offices do you have? What's your inventory look like? What's your employees, how many employees do you have? Where do I park? If a disaster happens, where do I park? Where's the building entrance? These little things that we get out of the way with our plan is so important to be able to streamline everything and to be transparent and in communication. Building contacts. So who am I calling? If you call me, do I need to call the maintenance guy? Do I need to call the security guy that has the keys? Getting all this stuff in place before a disaster happens is so imperative to help streamline the situation. Business interruption. Is there something I can do on my end from a contractor perspective to help minimize this business interruption? Whether that's if a disaster does happen, am I able to put containment up in one area while having you work in another area, which I've done before. Just having these plans in place is so important because it gives your client or the business owner ease. So whenever a disaster happens, it's, hey, I got one phone call to make. It's to Michael. We're going to get this going. And the other thing we talked about is putting together a vendor list, which is part of the ERP program. I have the capacity to handle as much of the job as need be, whether that's contents, mitigation, remediation, reconstruction, any of that kind of stuff. I have the capacity. But I understand that you guys, just like the doctor example, I understand that you guys have relationships with people already. It doesn't make sense for me to call my electrician in to look for 4.5 hours on how all the wiring goes to get you back up to speed when you got your buddy that you guys have been together for 10 years and he knows every part of your building. It's this conversation that we have before disaster happens that helps on the back end, because like we talked about before, there's only so much you can do on the reactive side. So we got to look at it from a proactive side.
Yeah, thanks, Michael. Let me just jump in there. Let's cut to the chase. I mean,
Yeah.
Okay, it's great. I want a disaster plan. I got to make it happen. How do I get a disaster? How do I get an ERP? Is that something that Dalworth Restoration can provide?
So as a risk management specialist, I do emergency response programs for anybody and everybody, for whether that's residential property management companies, small business owners, property management companies, hospitals, churches, all that kind of stuff. What I do is I provide a free service on the proactive side. I go out, I meet with the building owner, I meet with the tenant, whoever wants to put the plan in place. And I have simply a couple sheets of paper that we fill out to a proprietary software that we use that gives you access, that gives me access, that gives whoever contacts we need to give access, that literally puts a standard operating procedure on what to do when a disaster strikes. It's color coded. We're able to incorporate Matterport for documentation to be able to do a walk through the building, whether that's a risk management side on the proactive or the actual damage itself to keep transparent and keep the communication. It's pretty much a plan and then also a third-party application to keep everybody in communication.
So how do I activate the plan?
You call me. So you call me, we set an initial meeting, I bring some papers over, I take a little walk, I take some pictures, I kind of want to get to understand your business, because that's
so let me, and we're running out of time, so let me just interrupt. I apologize, Michael. No, I've had a disaster. It's 9:30 on October the 20th, and the roof just blew off my office. How do I activate the ERP that you put in place?
So what's really great is if you have the app and you want to do the software with us, you push a button. You push a button, it gives me a phone call and everything starts rolling. Keep in mind that I've already have your vendors in a vendor list that we've provided that we can both look at in real time. So you're able to give me a call and go, oh my God, roof came off. I got water damage inside. I need to get something going. What's going on? I pull up your account. I say, hey, yeah, I'm coming out here. We're going to mitigate that damage. Hey, would you like me to call John Lanassa, your roofer, to get him out here too and have him come out and meet me out here? So having that plan in place beforehand, I'm not doing the roof. I'm not getting paid for the roof or anything like that, but I'm helping facilitate this disaster that you've had by helping you take rocks out of your backpack, reduce stress, aggravation.
Thanks, Michael. I'm going to turn it over to Susanna. Tell us a little bit about how you can help small business owners prepare for the next storm, Susanna.
A lot of that is in the prep. You know, we've talked again about the disaster plan. It's asking the questions, what do I need? You know, sometimes I call myself, I'm a little ray of pitch black. I'm an unemotional person to talk about the worst thing that could possibly happen in your business. And we do it when there's nothing bad going, so that when you actually have an event, you know, and the likelihood is the more you prep, the less likely you'll actually have an event. But it's sitting down to ask myself, all right, if I'm out of business for 1, 3, 6, a week, a month, 6 months, 9 months, what does that look like for my business? How am I going to keep going? What money do I need? And looking at, do I have enough property coverage? If you only insure up to 50%, Benny mentioned this, your co-insurance clause, if you only have 50% of your property covered, the insurance company is only going to pay 50%. So and really you've got to give Benny and Michael something to work with when they come in and you have something done, and that's really sitting down and taking the time to have the conversations ahead of time.
Great. Thanks, Suzanne. I know I gave you a short shrift there, but thank you for bringing that to a close. I think we're almost at the end. I've been monitoring for questions. We don't really have a lot of questions. That's why I let the panelists speak on. I'd like to kind of just close the meeting. I want to thank our panel members so much for their participation and their just invaluable information. I hope everybody found it useful. I want to thank the NDCC staff for making all these meetings possible under terrible circumstances. Thank you, Jeffrey, for putting together our slideshow. I really want to thank everybody that's on for participating today and supporting the chamber. It's going to be great to see you all in a room for a change when this is over. Just want to remind people that on the 7th of May, we're going to have part 3 of When Disaster Strikes. We're going to be looking at some of the other more intangible aspects to a disaster, like data preservation, loss of key personnel, loss of goodwill to your business, public messaging to your customers and partners so that people understand what's going on, what your strategy is for getting back up and running. So I hope you'll join us on the 7th of May for that seminar.